I would love for us all to just take a moment, and I'm actually going to come down here on the floor and join you, to just settle in here, to appreciate how fortunate we all are to be in this space, which is so beautiful, and surrounded by people who are showing up here, who made the effort to come. And just close your eyes for a moment. Just close your eyes and sink in. Sink into your body. How are you feeling? Are you comfortable? You have everything you need. Take a deep breath. Ooh, I'm getting a new microphone. Woohoo! Is this better? Yes? Oh. Take an even deeper breath then. Another deep breath and let it out. Big. Whew. And raise your shoulders up to your ears. Way up. Just squeeze up and just drop it down. Drop it down. Drop it down. One more big raise of the shoulders. Oh, yeah. And let it down. Whew. And welcome. And open up for this big day, the first full day of our adventure. Looking forward to what you all bring to the table today. And I'm going to turn it over to my beloved.
I hope you enjoy the book. There are a couple things you need to know about the book. If you have taken a look at the book, you'll notice that it's very familiar because most of what's in the book is on the community platform as the course material. But if you read it and you look more closely, besides finding some typos and embarrassing mistakes, you will notice that there are some things that are a little bit different. There's some light editing and maybe some very little new material and different ways of saying some things. This book was prepared just for you. This is not the final book. It needs to go through some more drafts. But I had it printed just for you because I am so appreciative of you being here and being part of this community that I wanted you to have something you could hold in your hand and take with you. And I'm a little embarrassed about the picture on the back, but you have to understand that I finished preparing all of this for the printer at like 1 in the morning, and I just didn't know what to put there, because what could I do? Put a blurb from some made-up person that says, wow, what an incredible book, must read. So I put the picture there.
I think we've all just blessed this photo.
Oh, thank you. And I like to think that one day, again, I will have hair like that. So better than you can imagine, exactly. I mean, it's already better than you can imagine, right? I didn't imagine this. I thought it wasn't going to grow back until I was done with chemo. So it's arranged a little bit differently, and there was some editing. And Vanessa.
I just really appreciate that the photo of you on the back was by Peter.
Yes, thank you.
Here with us in way.
Peter Kovacs is another apprentice, and he's like my official photographer. That is one of my favorite pictures of me, and Peter took that at a surprise retreat that the apprentices put together, and I didn't know it was going to happen. I thought I was going to lunch with some friends, and they ambushed me. So yes, I'm very grateful for that. Thank you for that. Okay.
Robert,
yes. Oh, sorry.
What's embarrassing to you about the picture then?
What's embarrassing to me about the picture is not the picture, but that it's on the back cover of the book, because I don't normally like to draw that much attention to myself. But when I was preparing it at 1 in the morning, I thought, what do I put on the back cover? that's usually where there's a blurb or a summary or something. And I thought, for some reason, I had looked at that picture and I thought, fuck it, I'm just going to put that picture on there because that's sort of how I still see myself, and that's why. But it does. I don't normally like to,
Maybe on the second version it can be Cowboy Robert.
Yeah, I do have a picture of me in a cowboy hat as a kid, which I almost brought, but
So
yeah.
if you'll allow me a quick reframe, it's like,
Sure.
it's kind of backwards of the front of the book, right?
Yeah.
But this looks like it'd be the front of a Western romance novel. A reverse romance with yourself.
It's one of those. It's like one of those books, that you can read it in two directions. You can front to back or back to front. So it's like that's the back cover. It's like, oh, it's a romance novel. Oh no, it's kind of a picture. Exactly. Thank you for that.
You inspire people to fall in love with themselves or to
Thank you for that. I feel much better about it now. Thank you. Thank you.
What it is.
It's an
Essence perfume.
Oh God. All right. Okay.
Allison just coached you.
It's good. That was a good reframe. Thank you. That's good. It is such a privilege to be in the same room with such incredible people. I mean, truly. Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. And I do hope you enjoy it. And there will be another version that will be available. This will be a collector's item someday because there were only 45 copies printed. Yes.
Is there a way we can help? You said there were some typos. Is there a way we can flag those and help? Maybe if you can put it as a doc, we can comment.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it too much now because I'm going to still do a lot of rewriting, but I appreciate that, and I probably will put it up somewhere where you guys can give feedback on it when I have the next draft. So thank you for that. I'll keep you posted on that. All right. Okay. Let's talk about coaching from Essence. The essence of coaching from Essence is the conviction that everyone has a natural way of being in the world that is valuable without any real thought or effort on our parts. We come into the world with something to give that is valuable. So that is the essence of coaching from Essence, is that we help people to deepen their relationship with their essence so that they can begin to create a life that matches that. The aim of coaching from Essence is to help people disentangle themselves from forms, and I'll talk more about that. Learn how to navigate form, and ultimately how to create forms that are more congruent with their essence. And the reason for that simply is that when you are creating a life that matches your essence, you are happier. And in my experience, just the journey of doing that makes creating a life you love relatively effortless. Not that it isn't work, but it's not effort. It's not a struggle because things don't match or fit for you. And so that's really what coaching from Essence is all about. And that's true whether I'm working with the CEO and I'm helping them and what they're wanting to create is $1 billion company, or I'm working with someone who's just stuck in a relationship or trying to change something in their personal life. It's true for anything that you want to create. And so people will come to you for all different kinds of reasons. Usually they come to you with a problem. Very often that problem is about a problem they're having with another person because there are so many perplexities. Being in relationship is challenging. If it's not a problem or a person, it's often a process. They're trying to improve something, or it's a project that they're working on and they're either stuck or they don't quite know how to go about it. It might be a passage they're going through that they need help navigating. It might be a pattern. They've been given feedback from people that they show up in a certain way that doesn't work. There may be a leader, and several people have given them feedback that they're an arrogant asshole, and they're trying to figure out what to do about that. And sometimes it's a purpose. They are in some kind of transition in their life, or they've lost their way, and they're trying to figure out what they're here for, what their purpose is. Sometimes that purpose is to create a billion-dollar company or something. They have an inkling of a vision of something that they want to create, and they want to help clarifying that and creating that. But whatever they come to you for, what they're doing is really simple. And our goal is to help them create something better than they can imagine. So how do we do that? Now, I want to acknowledge, I know that this is very familiar territory for almost everybody in the room here. So a lot of what I'm going to present here is review. But this is really an invitation for you to take this deeper. My hope for you, or my intention for you, I don't believe in hope. My intention for you is that you leave this weekend having this stuff which many of you are familiar with, sort of on a head level, to really get it into your bones. So I invite you to ask me your toughest questions and bring up your challenges. But we're going to go through this, and I'm going to present it to you the way I would present it to a client, and also how I think about it sort of bigger picture. Okay? So regardless of why a client comes to you, all you're ever really doing is going from A to B. A is where you are now, and B is whatever it is that you want to create, wherever you want to go. If you want to stay at A, which I don't know why you would want to stay at A, then staying at A is your B. Nobody comes to you for coaching because they want to stay at A. Nobody comes to you because they're happy with exactly the way their life is and they don't want things to change. They want to change something, or they want to create something. So they want to go from A to B. Now, if you're going from A to B, and B is something that is not very aspirational or not very complicated, doesn't require a lot of resources or collaboration or time, and maybe it's even something you've done before, then you can have an idea of what it is you want to create, and there's a very good likelihood that you'll leave A and you'll get to something that looks very much like the B that you imagined when you left A. And if that's the case, then you're on a path. You can just think about B, you can get clear about B, and you can sort of reverse engineer it. You can figure out how to get there, and you just go through the steps. It's really a project management challenge. And so if you're on a path, you're a manager. And for many people, the path that they're on, or the B that they're trying to create, is something fairly familiar. Very often, it's just another version of something they already know how to create. And so the way I think of it, you're kind of a tourist. You're on a tour. It's like, here's what I did. Here's something with a different coat of paint. It's very familiar. It looks a little bit different, but it's essentially the same thing. We don't want to be on a path. I want to be clear here, there's no judgment about this. There's a good part of your life, everyone's life or everyone's business, should be path-like. You don't have to recreate everything about your life every day. You have certain habits that serve you. In a business, there are certain processes and strategies and so forth that you can replicate, and you just scale them up. That's, if you're a startup, you want to find your path so that you can repeat it and scale it. There's nothing wrong with being on a path. But if you're only on a path, life isn't very interesting. So we don't want all of our life to be on a path. We don't actually want just B. We want something better than B. something better than we can imagine when we leave A. And I call that B prime. B prime is something that is aspirational. In other words, it requires a personal transformation. It's more complicated. Maybe it requires collaboration. It's bigger than you. You can't do it by yourself. It will take more time and resources. Success is not guaranteed. See, if you're just recreating something you pretty much already know how to do, you can have a high confidence that you'll succeed at it. When you're trying to create B prime, you don't even know maybe if it's possible. You don't know it's possible until you go on that adventure. And so, since you don't know what's possible, that journey to B prime is what I call a quest. It's not a path. You don't know how to get there. You don't even know what's possible. You don't know what it could look like. So, that's my definition of leadership. You're not a leader unless you're helping people navigate the unknown and move into creating something better than they can imagine when they leave A. If you're just helping them get somewhere that everybody can see and understand and everything, you're a manager. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. You need to be doing both. You are doing both of these in your life. If you're on a quest, you don't know it's possible, you don't know what it could look like, you don't know exactly how to do it, and so you're not a tourist anymore. It's an adventure. And that's the invitation. That's the beautiful thing about being on a quest, is that it makes your life an adventure. Now, I just want to share with you where this idea came from, by the way. I was coaching someone, and it was the first session that we were having together. I knew the person, but we met for coffee, and the first thing he said to me was, I want you to help me find the shortest distance to becoming a great leader. And I said, great, what do you want to lead? And he said, I don't know. So he said, let me back up, sorry. He said, I want you to help me find the shortest path to becoming a great leader. What do you want to lead? I don't know. Then you're not on a path, you're on a quest. That was the first time I had the idea and said it. So that to me is good coaching. And the reason it's good coaching is my definition of a good coaching session is where both people get something they didn't know they needed and learn something they didn't know they knew. And I didn't know that I knew quest until somebody asked me. Until someone presented me the opportunity to think about it that way. And that's the beauty of coaching. So that's where this came from. So I thought about quest, and I thought, yeah, how do you go on a quest and all of that. So that's what I'm sharing with you. So B prime, we don't know what's possible. We don't know what it looks like. So what do we do when we leave A? How do we go on a quest? Well, we have to aim for something. So we don't want B, but we aim for a B, something that we know. And what we know is the best thing that we can imagine. So we have an idea, which is the best thing that we can imagine when we leave A, and we aim for that. But we don't actually want that because we don't know what's possible for us. There might be something better. When I decided that I was ready to start looking for a beloved again, I had an idea of what I was looking for. But Michelle is so much better than the best thing that I could imagine. So we don't know what's possible for us. The invitation is to open yourself up to the idea that maybe the universe, or whatever you want to call it, knows better than you do what's possible for you. Okay? Now, to create B prime, We aim for the best thing that we can imagine with the intention or the openness to there being something much better than we can imagine. That's what we want to create. To do that, we have to risk what I call B sub. B sub some people call that failure. To have the possibility of creating B prime, we have to risk B sub. In other words, we have to risk that we might create something less than we can imagine, something that we maybe don't actually want. Some people call that a failure. If you're on a tour and you end up in the wrong place, it could be a failure. But if you're on a quest and you end up in a place that isn't what you thought, then it's not a failure, it's a lesson. One of the reasons more people don't create B prime is they're afraid of having a lesson. They're afraid of creating something less than they want. You have to be willing to risk creating something less than what you want in order to open yourself to the possibility of something better than you can imagine. Okay? Now, if you're not doing one of those three things, you're drifting. And you don't want to drift. Drifting means you're aimless, you're not open, you have no intention, you have no curiosity. I'll talk later about the 4 kinds of serendipity, one of which is wandering and wondering. Drift is not to be confused with wandering and wondering. Wandering and wondering is putting yourself in places you wouldn't ordinarily go with a lot of attention and openness and presence and noticing. And drifting is just drift. The only benefit of drift is that it can be restorative. If you have been through a really difficult passage, then drifting for a little while can be relaxing and restorative. It's not entirely a bad thing, but just understand that you won't get very far if you let yourself drift too much. Yes?
You said if you're not doing one of those 3 things, you mean if you're not doing B prime,
Yeah, yes, yeah. If you're not on a quest or a path, or you're not risking failure, you're not doing something intentionally and risking failure, you're just drifting. Okay? This is what I call the short form of A to B, this model. And this model I share with almost every client or prospective client in the very first session that I have with them. I'm not going to talk a lot about practice building this weekend unless you have some questions, and feel free to ask any questions that you have. But just briefly, the first session that I do with a client is almost always 2 hours, and I think of it as a dream session. In other words, it's not a taster session, it's not a fit conversation, it's not a needs assessment, it's not a 30-minute session. It's 2 hours. I invite the person, if I think they're a good prospect as a client, I invite them to a 2-hour conversation so that we can have a meaningful conversation about their life. And the first hour and 15 minutes is usually sort of problem solving. They're presenting one of those things I talked about, a problem with a person, a process, a project, a passage, a pattern, a purpose. It's almost always one of those things. And I work with them for about an hour, and my intention is to create as much value as possible in that hour. And then I say, look, let me give you a way to think about this. All you're really trying to do is get from A to B. And in the old days when I would meet my prospective clients in cafes usually, and the reason I like to meet people in cafes is because what do you normally do when you go to a cafe with someone? It's a friend and you're talking about your personal life. I want people to feel comfortable and open. And so I would say, look, let me give you a way to think about this. I'd pull out a 3x5 card and I would draw this out. And they would almost always keep it after the session. And so this is the basic model. And then I would invite them into a conversation about what their quest is. And I would invite them to dream. So to shift from a problem-solving mentality to a possibility mentality. And I would get them to think about what could be possible if they were to work with someone like me. What could be possible if they had an ally on that journey, on that quest? And then if they were interested in that, then I would move into my enrollment conversation and all of that. Okay? So this is the basic model. Now I'm going to build on this in a minute, but I know that many of you, if not most of you, have done this, some version of this with me, either coming up with a B for a workshop or a program we were doing, or maybe for your practice. But what I'm going to invite you to do now is to come up with your B for your ideal life. And so we're going to do some rapid journaling. And rapid journaling means I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to do this. So you take out your notebook. You're not writing out a long paragraph or story about this, just sort of bullet points with enough detail that you can go back to these notes and you'll know what you meant. And you can do some more journaling later. I recommend that you maybe fold the page and do your rapid journaling on the left so that way when you come back and reflect on it, you can write some additional notes on the right-hand side. But whatever works for you. That's sometimes how I do it. So I'm going to give you, 3 minutes. I'll check in with you after 3 minutes. Yes?
We're doing B or B prime?
Well, you can't do B prime because you don't know what B prime is. You're doing, B is the best thing that you can imagine for your life.
And is this holistic across all life parts or business coaching?
Yeah. No, I don't want you to just think about your ideal practice. I want you to think about what is the overarching theme of your life. Thanks for that question, Greg. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. But what I want is, what's the overarching theme of your life? What is the quest that you're on right now? What's the best thing that you could imagine for your life that you want to create? And your practice might be part of that, but what does having whatever your ideal practice do for you? How does that help you create the ideal life? What would a life you love look like? Okay? And just take a few minutes to do that. Okay. Let me have your attention up here. If you're not quite done, that's fine. You can keep jotting some notes. We're going to talk a little bit more, and then I'm going to have you get with a partner and do some work on this. But now that you've written that B, we have to ask, where does that B come from? How do you know that's a good B for you? Okay? When you're talking with clients and they come to you, very often clients will come to you with what I call a bonsai dream. And nothing against, I love bonsai and I love the Japanese, so it's not a criticism. Bonsais are beautiful, but they're also miniature versions of magnificent trees. And many people, when they come to you and you say, oh, what's your quest? What's your dream? If you were to go on this journey to see what could be possible for you, what would you do? They'll give you a beautiful miniature version of it. And we don't want them going on a quest to create a bonsai for themselves. So we have to ask, where does B come from? Well, let me ask you this. How many of you have ever had your heart broken? Great. Everybody, right? What did you learn from having your heart broken? Just call it out. What did you learn?
What I want.
What's that?
What I want.
What you learned what you wanted, because you got what you didn't want, so you learned what you wanted. Yes?
How to let go.
How to let go, okay?
Trust in self.
Trusting yourself.
Be stronger.
Be-
Be stronger.
How to be stronger.
So trust in myself.
Oh, trust in yourself, okay?
Make better,
Forgiveness.
make better choices.
Make better choices. Notice, sorry?
How alive I am.
How alive you are. Great.
Profound pain.
Profound
Pain. Pain.
Pain, yes. The transformation in pain, yes. All these answers are beautiful answers. Notice, though, everyone raised their hand. It's a universal experience, and I'm not suggesting that everyone has the same experience, but everyone has experienced heartbreak. We've all learned something different from it. We all choose what to learn from our experiences. And so we have experiences. Things happened to us in the past. We made choices about what those experiences meant. And those choices help determine what's true for us. And so we often want to create something based on what we've chosen from the past. So the bottom line is many of us, much of the time, are actually creating from the past. But we're often trying to solve a problem that no longer exists. I'll talk more about that at some point, I'm sure. So B is often really just something that is trying to solve a problem from the past, or is a response to a choice that we made about what something meant. So we're creating from the past. We want to create from the future. We want to create from a place of possibility. So how do we know whether or not we have a good B? And by good B, I mean a B, a way of thinking about the future that opens us up to as much possibility. So how do we do that? Or what makes a good B? So what makes a good B? The first thing is it's not a bonsai. It's not a beautiful miniature version of a dream. And so when someone talks to you, when a client comes to you and they talk about something they're creating, it's often helpful to just question it and see if that's really what they want, if that's the real dream, or if it's a safe version. It's yours. Sometimes people come to you and what they say they want is not what they want, it's what their spouse wants, or their significant other, or their parents, their mother or their father, or their friends, their peers, or their boss, or media, or advertising, or something. It's not their real dream. It's something that they've taken on from somebody else. A good B is a representation of your longing. And what I mean by that is I draw a distinction between longing and desire. Desire comes from outside. It's a shiny object. It's, I desire the new iPhone, okay? And I'm going to get the new iPhone. But that's not longing. Longing is, I have a longing to be of service. That's what was calling me in my life. So you want to help the person think about what is it they long for? What is the life that is longing for them? Who was it? Bama, I think. You, in your self-portrait, you had something about the universe wants to speak through you. What is your...
You are the universe expressing itself.
You are the universe expressing itself. The problem is most of us are not expressing the universe. We want to go on a quest that creates as big a space as possible for us to bring our essence into the world. That's what we're all longing for. So we want to help the client to create something that is, we live in a world of forms, so we're going to create forms, but we want to create forms that are congruent with our essence and that are big enough to contain the life that we want to bring into the world. So longing, yes, great.
Stop me from getting ahead of myself.
Sure.
When I think about longing, the distinction that you made about it coming from within and not from without.
Yeah.
I'll speak for myself. I know I've had the experience that some of my longings have come from past pains that I felt I don't feel anymore. So then I pick a story, if I have this thing, I'll no longer feel the kind of pain I felt your lesson is to not live your life with the solution to a problem no longer exists. Yeah. So I'm curious about when we're examining these or our clients' these, how do we distinguish the longing that comes from an old wound that might be trying to solve a problem no longer exists? Yeah. Or is something perhaps more pure or appropriate or inspiring? Yeah.
So don't get too caught up in the distinction, but the way that I think of it, actually the what you call a longing, wanting to relieve a pain from the past, could be a desire. To me, a longing is a calling. It's a pull. It's another way to think of it is tropisms. A tropism is a natural way to grow in a certain direction. So plants are tropistic to light. I have a little money plant on my desk, and every few weeks I have to turn it around because it starts to grow like this. This is a glass wall in my office. It's on my desk, and I water the thing, and it just sort of grows like this. And then every few weeks I have to turn it around, and then it grows like this. Right? That's tropisms. So we all have tropisms. We're all tropistic to our essence. We're always trying to turn our life toward our essence. But there are always things that are getting in the way of that. And so sometimes the pain that we experience, the pain that you experienced in your childhood, which we'll talk much more about this evening because it ultimately comes down to the love threshold. The problem that no longer exists that we're all trying to solve is how do we prove to ourselves that we're lovable? Because we all have this split between our essence and who we've had to become in order to navigate a world that isn't very supportive of essence. This will all make sense, much more sense by the end of this evening.
Yes. So while we're on that topic,
yes.
To the yours piece, and you said not your spouses, and I'm struck that in the constraints that we have within nuclear families, right, your goals may be entirely different, have material consequences than your family's material goals.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that? How do you disaggregate the fact that, the people that we're talking to, they have real constraints, right? Material constraints in terms of what their families expect. Material.
Yes. Yes. I should say that it's not entirely a bad thing that we're not able to fully express our essence everywhere. Like we all have to learn to get along with each other in a world where other people are also expressing their essence. Okay? Yes. You in the back row.
One of the things you have to think in terms of when you're thinking about relationship, you need to be in a relationship where everyone can express their essence, right? That's part of being in a really awesome relationship, is that you augment the other person's essence and that they're complementary. Mm-hmm. And you're right, there are constraints within relationships, but part of the choice is we are in this together, so we are always co-creating within whatever our essence is true for, we might be leading a very different life if, say, Robert didn't have cancer. It's my choice to be with someone who has cancer, ergo, the life choices we make together are ones that are consistent with that.
Yeah, to be in relationship, you have to negotiate, you have to navigate that. But if you're in a relationship that is not supportive or is worse, destructive to your essence, it probably is not a healthy relationship. If you're in a job or on a team or you work in a company that doesn't support, at least in some way, your essence enough for you to be able to express it in a satisfactory way, you will not be happy or thrive there. So, yes, Jeremiah.
Going back to your, how do you know it's your essence or just something that's been trained in you?
We're going to talk about essence this afternoon. If I don't talk about that, please bring it up then. Thank you for that. But we're going to talk. We're going to focus on essence after lunch. Did you have a question, Jesse? Yeah. Sure.
I like the way that you bring up material constraints. I think that's what brings us all together. We're all in this material space. together. And what I love about the example or metaphor of essence is that essence is almost separate or connected to form. And so the better we understand our material constraints, and the better we understand our essence separately and together, then we can bring our essence into whatever constraint exists in this material world. It's almost like a spiritual sense of self, and then the way that it exists in our bodies and in the world.
We'll talk more about form at some point, but yes, form can be constraining. Our aim is to create forms that are more spacious, that allow us to bring more of our essence, and relationships are forms. We navigate and negotiate what kind of relationship we're going to have. And so we want to create relationships that are spacious enough for us to bring more of our essence and more possibility. Okay? Excuse me for blowing my nose so much, but I don't have any nose hair. So the tissues sort of accumulate. I like to think of them like they're flowers. What did you say? Yeah, thank you. I know that in some cultures white is death, and I kind of like that idea, actually. I think a little bit of what I don't need anymore is dying. Yes?
I don't know, I forgot your name.
Tatiana.
You sparked a question for me about sometimes, what I sometimes struggle with as a coach is that not all of people's, I guess you call them material constraints, they're not all choices. Some people have one be primed that they have a kid with special needs, or a sick kid, or a spouse that they chose 20 years ago who's now sick but they're committed to them.
Yes.
You know, all kinds of things that people aren't choosing per se, but it's the gifts, like it's what life is given to them, yet they're really thinking about how do I do my be primed within those unchangeable things. And I struggle with that and would love.
Yeah. So you know what I would say to someone who has a constraint like that? I say, great. What would it look like if working, being with your disabled child or whatever, what would be the ideal scenario for that? Let's create that. So it's a shift from problem solving, which is useful. I mean, often they come to you with that, and so you help them sort of solve their practical material constraints. But then you say, great, so what would the ideal be? What could be possible here? How could we make this something that was more joyful in your life? What would it look like if this experience could be so much more positive? What could be possible here? And that's a quest. Yes, Daisy.
One of the challenges I've had is in meeting a lot of people that are on quests, and they're very, they're really willing to take those risks. And I sometimes don't know how to help them with the bridging the gap between the managerial aspect, because they do struggle in relationships because they just see a world better than everyone else can imagine, and they think everyone should be on the boat and sailing towards their vision. And I think that, so one thing I've done is go from B to B prime, like a ladder, and explain it as dominoes. Like if they need a managerial aspect that helps support the quest.
Yes.
But I always feel a little, like I'm not quite nuancing it with them. I'm not bridging that gap between their leadership and their management and their communications, I guess, with management. I don't know if I'm articulating that clearly.
It sounds like if you have someone who's on a quest and they're always looking at what could be possible, and they're not grounding it with any sort of, managerial or path-like behavior, yes, it can be a problem. You need both. That's why I say there's no judgment about it.
Constantly in this frustration.
Yeah.
The person isn't thinking as big, and they're not going as fast, or the nuts and bolts of the operational aspect.
Well, are you talking about a team now, or there's?
I'm talking about the leader developing their crew, enough so that they can be on the quest.
Yeah.
And they're just those relational
Okay.
frustrations.
So I don't know if you noticed, I have a chart over here called parking lot.
Okay, I'll try it.
And we're going to, if you're interested in that, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Because that's a little bit bigger question.
I have just a logistical
Sorry. Yes.
care and concern.
Yes.
Because I know a big part of this is getting a good recording.
Yes.
And I'm wondering in terms of us asking questions with masks on, whether we should be miking the questions.
We should be miking the questions. Thank you for that.
Do we need a mic runner?
I think,
Yeah, it's been hard to
okay, Michelle will be, no, thank you for that, Sahai. That's a good point. Vanessa had a question.
It's not a question, it's
And
a comment.
yes. Wait for the mic.
So it was in following up to your comment about constraints. And, well, I have a story about you, Robert, but
Yes.
you can correct me if I nailed it or not. But I feel like in many ways, Robert has B-primed cancer. And some of, I mean, for many of us, that would be really, B-sub. And Robert has created something even better he can imagine in these last 5 years. And you even had a client who worked in the cancer space that got you into early trials.
Yep.
And that's even better than any of us could have imagined. So I feel like we all have some kind of constraint or unexpected. Maybe it looks less pronounced as like my child has extreme disability or something, but like we all do. And in some ways, the world is going to be trying to inhibit our essence for all of us. And the B prime invitation can apply to things that are devastating and terrible. And, you have to have care about how do you present that to somebody who's in struggle or challenge or really terrible situations. But anyway.
Sure. Yeah, thank you
Those are
for
my
that.
thoughts.
We'll talk more about that tomorrow evening, which is the dark ally, that everything that comes into your life has the potential to be a gift. I view cancer as a gift. I hope that I have cancer for a very, very, very long time. I have learned so much from cancer. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I am on a quest. My relationship to cancer is, oh, okay, nobody knows the solution to this? Great, I'm going to go on a quest. How do I make cancer meaningful in my life? How do I turn it into a gift? How do I beat the odds? When I said yesterday, when I had you draw your hand in your book, some of you were upset with me because your index finger was longer. My index finger, my cancer, is way over here. But that doesn't mean anything. When I was diagnosed, and it'll be 5 years November 14th, when I was diagnosed, the 5-year survival rate for someone with stage 4 prostate cancer was 30%. The 5-year survival rate, if you have metastases, and I have metastases to my sit bones, I forget what it is now. It's something, it's what? Yeah, I think it's something like 9%. So, you know what I say to that, Cookie? Bullshit. Because I'm not the base case. I'm not the base case because I'm not on a path. I'm on a quest. Okay? So yes, there are always material constraints. We're always navigating form. We live in a world of form. I'm navigating, this body is a material constraint. I navigate it every day. But I also love it.
Yes.
My friend Gary Brewer was diagnosed with months to live, and everyone told me it was impossible. It was 2 years ago, they gave him 3 months. He now, a month ago, tested no cancer. He's painted and created so much artwork since the beginning of this. He dropped right into his essence, and he just went on that quest. And it is so beautiful to see the work he's created, the amount of people he's inspired. It's breathtaking. And so are you.
Thank you. Okay. One more question, and then we need to move on. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the
Daniel.
future. I'll speak it to him at some point because I feel like this ties into
Yeah. Thanks for that. I'm probably going to talk about it tomorrow morning because that's more, I usually talk about the futurosity continuum more with my executive coaching clients. But yes, thanks for that. So stay tuned. I want to go through just a few more things, and then I think it's time to take a break. And then we'll come back and we'll do some more work. But let me just finish this thought here. So a good B is longing. It's not just desire. It's something that you're meaningfully drawn to. It's tropistic. It's an urge. It's it's what's calling you. It's meaningful. And so it requires a quest. It's not something you've done before. Success isn't assured, okay? It's congruent. It has to be congruent with your essence. And so when I'm making a decision about what to do with my life, I ask myself what I call the 3 essence questions. The first question is, will this create a life I love? The second question is this my best way of serving congruent with my essence? So if I do this, am I being of service in a way that's congruent with my best self? And the third question is, who will I become? You see, if you follow your desires, you might become an asshole. There's a lot of evidence that suggests the more money you have and status and everything else, the less compassionate you are. I don't want to be an asshole. I want to be the best human being I can be. So if I'm deciding what to do with my life, I ask myself, is this my best way of serving in a way that's congruent with my essence? And will I like who I become if I do this? So it has to be congruent. If someone is doing something, if a client tells you they want to create something that doesn't feel congruent with their essence, you need to challenge it. There are times when it makes sense to create something that isn't necessarily congruent. You may need to because of some constraint. You may have to get a job for a little while that you don't really love in order to make some money so that you can create more opportunity for yourself to create something that's more congruent. That's okay. That's a negotiation with form, navigating form. But ideally, we want to create forms that are congruent. We want to go on a quest to create something that would be a reflection of our essence. It should be transformational, and all I mean by that is it should be something that requires a personal transformation. If you can create whatever it is with who you are now, it's more likely a path. In other words, if you don't have to grow or learn anything or be different in any way, if you can already do it as you are now, it's not a quest, and you don't really need a coach to be who you already are. So a good quest is a quest that requires a personal transformation. It requires growth. It requires you to stretch and to learn something new. It should be vivid and compelling. In other words, it's not better than you can imagine, but it is what you can imagine. The clearer it is, the more likely you are to succeed, because the easier it is to know whether you're getting closer to, whether you're getting hot or cold. So you want it to be vivid and you want it to be compelling, meaning that it's really meaningful for you. And finally, it should be a major chord, what I call a major chord. And that comes from, there's a movie called New York, New York. Have any of you, nobody seen it? Okay, just a couple of. It's an older movie, so I'm dating myself. But New York, New York. It's Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli. And I saw this movie probably 40 years ago or something. Or 30 or something. There's a really cute scene in the movie where Robert De Niro is trying to sort of seduce Liza Minnelli, and he jumps into a cab with her. And he's a saxophone player and she's a singer, and he's explaining to her, look, life is all about trying to create a major chord. You got your music, you got your money, you got your woman, that's a major chord. When you have all those pieces, you've got a major chord. For some strange reason, that scene has stuck in my head for 30 or 40 years. When I was seriously depressed, which I think I've shared with many of you. You know, in 2014, September of 2014, I had my heart broken, physically and emotionally. And for 2 years, 2015 and 2016 were the hardest years of my life. My life just really fell apart. It was really all about the love threshold, which I'll talk about tonight. But while I was going through this, I thought, okay, what would it look like if I put my life back together? And what I came up with was my major chord. And my major chord was beloved. B prime. Friends and family. I like to think B prime. Work and purpose. B prime. Health. Working on B prime. And then home. We live in our dream home. I mean, I've never in my life felt more at home on the planet than where we live now. So that's a major chord. Now, the reason this is important is because, you know, sometimes this is called an ecology check. In other words, if you're trying to change something in your life, you say, all right, well, how does this impact everything else? So you don't want to create a one-legged stool with your client. If someone is really committed and excited and motivated to create a billion-dollar company, it's reasonable to ask them what they're doing to maintain good, healthy relationships and to take care of themselves physically. And, you know, what does it look like for everything in their life to work? So it's good when someone goes on a quest, you want to do a check and make sure that it's a major chord, that everything will work if they go on that quest. Okay? Now, every good quest begins with a question. Whatever you've written, it's helpful to distill it all down to one question that can be sort of a North Star for you. When I was depressed, I would wake up every morning and I would ask myself, how did this get to be my life? That is not a question. But if you ask yourself a question often enough, you will get an answer to it. And the answer to that question for me, after asking it for about a year, was I was half-hearted everywhere in my life. I was half-hearted in my work. I was half-hearted in my relationship. I was half-hearted everywhere in my life. I had one foot in and one foot out of everything I was doing in my life. And so I realized that that was not going to make me happy. And as a result of being half-hearted, I became broken-hearted. I mean, not just in the relationship, but just in my life. I was sort of broken-hearted with my work. It was all very transactional and unsatisfying. You know, I wasn't satisfied anywhere. So I went from being half-hearted to broken-hearted, and then I realized what I wanted was to be wholehearted. And that was my question. How can I be wholehearted? And so I went on a quest to be wholehearted. So I went from being half-hearted to broken-hearted. The first thing I had to do was open my heart and be vulnerable. And I am so thankful for the people that I met, because I was always the guy, you know, like Michelle said, have I met you somewhere? No. Like, I was not very open. I was not open to other people helping me. And I managed to make friends with some people who were willing to be my friend, even though I didn't even want to be around myself. There were some people at a group of young people living in a house called the Dhammapad and Zesty Manor. And I sort of got connected to this group of people. And then, you know, by optimizing for serendipity, I kept creating all these relationships that were amazing. You know, I'd never had such friends before. And so first I had to be open-hearted, and then I had to reinvent the way that I showed up in the world, how I was in relationship and the kind of work that I was creating. And then I feel like I'm pretty wholehearted now. What you see is what you get. I try to bring as much of myself, my best self, to what I do. And so the next step for me is big-hearted. And that's why I want to give all this away. So it began, though, with a quest. How can I be wholehearted? Now, just one more thing, and then we'll take a break. We're going to talk more about, there are some questions that we use in coaching, but one of the best questions in coaching is what I call the wayfinding question. If you're ever lost, you just ask the client, if you were to distill all of this down to the one question you most want an answer to, what would that question be? I've asked this question, I don't know, at least 100 times. I've never, ever had someone say, I don't know. They always come up with a question. And this question, in a way, this wayfinding question, is your question. That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to think of everything you wrote for your B and distill it all down to the one question you most want an answer to. And that's your quest. For me right now, my quest, because I feel pretty wholehearted. My quest now is how can I live and die gracefully? That's the quest I'm on right now. Okay? So I invite you to think about your question. We're going to take a break. And let's take a 10-minute break. So if you need to grab something to drink, if you need to do some fluid adjustment, input or outflow, or you need to go outside and catch a little bit of sun, please be the host, meaning come back on time. 10 minutes. Okay? I have to be very careful every time I use the restroom because I think I project pretty well. And I used to be a trainer for 30 years. And so for a long time, I would do, groups like this without a microphone. And then once I was training a bunch of financial advisors, and there were 50 or 60 people in this, in this office in kind of this, sort of amphitheater, sort of. And they insisted that I have a mic. And I'd never had a mic before. And so I didn't really think about it. And I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I got a standing ovation. And so I've never forgotten that experience. So I always have to double check. That was really. That was a true story, by the way. That was. I won't forget that. Okay. Also I should tell you, the mic running and everything doesn't really work very well. So if you have a question, I'm going to try to summarize it before I answer it. Or if you have a comment, speak up. And it's just, I think that'll be better than trying to pass the mic around and everything. Let me just check in with you, because I know some of this is very familiar to you, maybe some nuance. How is this for you so far?
Great.
Good? Solid? Good. Again, my intention for you is for you to really turn this into bone knowledge, like for you to just get so clear about it that you can really, it becomes second nature in your own life and in your conversations with clients. It just flows very easily, because this really is sort of the, I think of this as the sort of the map. This is the treasure map. This is what we're really trying to create or find in our work. I think of the 6 questions as another kind of map, and the futurosity continuum I think of as the compass, and levels of creation. By the way, if any of these are new to one or two of you, we'll cover it this weekend. I think of levels of creation as your backpack. And so now you've got everything you need to go on this journey, okay? So here's what I'd like to do. You have all written something about your ideal scenario, and you've either written or given some thought to your question, the overarching question that will sort of pull you and everything else you've written down there as your ideal scenario on your quest. And so what I'd like you to do is to, in just a minute, I'm going to have you get with a partner, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes, so 10 minutes each. Because this is really about creating a life that you love, that is your best way of serving in the world in a way that's congruent with your essence, so that you will become the kind of human being you aspire to become. And so I want you to take some time to really reflect on how well it fits. Is it not a bonsai dream? Is this your real dream? By the way, when I say a bonsai is a beautiful miniature, I don't mean that a better bee is a bigger bee. It's not about bigger. When someone comes to me and they have a really big bee, I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious that it's not the solution to a problem that no longer exists once and for all. In other words, they're trying to create something so big and impressive that then everybody will love them. You know? It's a compensation. It's not about bigger, it's about better. I don't care how big Coaching from Essence gets. I care about how good it is and how well it serves the people who are here. I think it was Brandon. Where's Brandon? I think it was Brandon last night who read a quote about if you can really impact one person, that's how I think about it. The fact that there are 30 people here is astounding to me and humbling. So a good bee is a better bee, a bee that is more congruent, that's authentic, that brings you more alive, that's more aligned with your true longing. It isn't necessarily bigger. Bigger might be better than you can imagine, but rarely is that a real aim. Okay? All right, so not a bonsai, yours, longing, quest, congruent, transformational. It requires a personal transformation. It's vivid and clear and compelling, and it's ecologically friendly. In other words, it's not a one-legged stool. If you accomplish this, it isn't going to throw everything else in your life out of whack. So, what I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is to stand up and let serendipity do its work. I think we have 30 people, right? So it should be an even number. If not, Michelle will be partners with someone, but I think we do have 30. So in a minute, when I say go, stand up, take your notebooks with you, find a partner, and if you do want to go outside, totally fine, but please don't leave this area here so that I'm going to just wander around and you know, I'd just like to hear how the conversations are going so I sort of know where you are in the conversation. You can stay here or go outside. I'm going to ask you again to be the host, to time yourselves, 10 minutes a person. So when I say go, if you can come back in 20 minutes, it's, by my watch, it's 21 minutes after 11. So at 11:42. Okay, questions before you go? Yes, Ariel.
Question about this list. We talked about it being B prime.
Yeah.
This list is characterized. But before we were introducing the list, we were talking about creating for the future.
Yes.
Is this list also kind of related to the creating for the future? Like is B prime creating for the future?
Yes. What I mean by creating from the future is it's not limited by the past. So when you come back after we do this exercise, I'm going to tell you exactly how to go on a quest. And the first step is to make a list of everything you really want but think is impossible. That's creating from the future. In other words, the reason you start with what you want to create and not where you are. You have to do both. You have to be clear about what you want and you have to be honest about where you are. You have to tell the truth about where you are. But the reason you start with what you want to create is because what you want to create shouldn't be limited by where you are. It shouldn't be limited by the past or the present. And so creating from the future is you're not limited by that. You think about what you really want, even if it's impossible. That's the future. Because it's unknown. We don't know what's possible. So we're on a quest to find out what's actually possible. Does that make sense? Okay, thanks. And I apologize, I called you Ariel. What? What? Oh, Bruce, yes. And I apologize, it's Burju, right?
Burju, yes.
Burju.
But I answered the Bruce.
Okay, but I'm going to apologize again. For months while you were on Zoom, I called you Bursu.
That's okay.
So,
I answered
Burju.
as a variation
Okay.
of my name. It makes it
All right. I do know who you are, is what I want you to know. Okay, great. Thank you. Jeremiah.
I'm not 100% clear on the
Yes. What you're doing with your partner, you're going to get with your partner, you're going to tell them what you wrote down and your question, and you're going to say, let me just do a check here. Is this not a bonsai dream? Am I really dreaming my real dream? Is it mine and not somebody else's? Is it really authentic and aligned with my true longing? Is it a quest, not just recreating something I already know how to do? Is it congruent with my essence? Will it require a personal transformation? Is it vivid? Do you understand it? Can you see it too? Is it compelling, and is it a major chord? If I do this, will it throw my life out of kilter, or will it just make everything in my life better? Okay? Thanks. All right, on your marks, get set, go! Okay, so Allison had something she wanted to say.
And going
Yes.
through this, I realized I was a little confused about how to determine if my own dream was a bonsai because I'm not in the future, so I
Right.
don't know if what I'm imagining,
Mhm.
which presumably is B, not B prime, but
Yep. So the question was, how do you know whether or not your dream is a bonsai? And the way you know is you may not know, but your coach will know. So when you're coaching and your client presents something to you that doesn't feel right, there's something, that doesn't fit. I'll give you a very simple example. I think I've told this story before. I had a client once who was a very high-level executive at a tech company in Silicon Valley. And this was pre-COVID, and so I was meeting her for a coaching session at their offices. And she said, I have a friend here from New York. Can I just introduce you to her? And I said, sure. So her friend comes in, and we chat for a minute. And I said, so, what are you working on? If you could create anything, what would you create? And she said, I'd love to, she was in sales, and she said, I would love to manage a sales team. And I said, great, so what's your experience in sales? And she told me this long, very impressive resume. And I said, why do you want to just manage a team? Why don't you want to be like VP of sales? So what she told me was a bonsai dream. It was a smaller version of what she really wanted. When I said, how come you're not the VP of sales? She lit up. And she was like, really? And so, and that whole conversation lasted about 5 or 7 minutes. And then she said, how does this coaching work? How much does it cost? You never answer that question until you're in an enrollment conversation, or you've had a dream session where you've had the opportunity to really take time with someone and really demonstrate the value that you can create. Then that conversation is meaningful. So what I said was, hey, look, I'll tell you what I'm willing to do. I will have a 2-hour session with you. Let's block out 2 hours right now. Take out your phone and let's make an appointment. I'll do 2 hours with you. I'll coach you. You'll have an experience of what it's like to work with me. I'll know what it's like to work with you. And then if it makes sense at the end of that conversation, we can talk about what it looks like to work together. And so she actually didn't become a client because COVID happened. And she was looking for a job. She was afraid that it wouldn't happen with COVID.
Are your dream sessions always free?
Yes. Dream sessions are always free. I always do a dream session if it's a referral, because I want people to refer to me. So even if I know that that person they're referring to me is not going to be a client, not anyone I would want as a client, I still always do a 2-hour dream session with them. And in that 2 hours, when I do a dream session, my intention is to transform that person's life in 2 hours so that they're so blown away that they don't even want to work with me. It's like I never sandbag, I never hold anything back. I give everything, and I try to change that person's life. Sometimes people just say uncle, They say, God, this has been amazing. You've given me so much to work with. Can I just sort of sit with this for a month? Like that's really my aim. I want to give them so much that they see it could be so valuable that they want to work with me. That's why I say I don't believe in taster sessions or fit conversations or discovery or needs assessments or whatever. That's not serving the client, that's serving you. And it's a very transactional mindset. My mindset is to give as much as I can so the person sees so much value in it that they want to work with me. Okay? Yeah.
So I'm going to be really vulnerable. I feel like I have major imposter syndrome when you say that, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing that you can go in and transform someone in 2 hours potentially.
Yeah.
And then my inner voice says, well, I could never do that. I need 6 months with someone to like even move a couple inches.
Yeah.
So I'm just, you're telling us how to do that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I guess I have a little bit of imposter that comes up when I
yeah. And listen, I had imposter syndrome too at the beginning. Imposter syndrome is when your capability is up here and your identity is down here. In other words, you're more capable than you know. And so you have to, you're obviously not going to bring your capability down. You're going to raise your identity. You're going to become who you already are. Where's Zeke? Zeke, do you mind if I share what we were talking about at breakfast? So Zeke said, Zeke is talking about creating his practice, and he says, it's sort of like, I know that he's been trying to create it the way he created his successful business. But that isn't how he wants to create this, but he doesn't know how to do it differently. So what he was doing was trying to create it the way he created his last successful business. And that's the solution to a problem that no longer exists. He had to create his last business the way he did because he was really in survival when he started that business. And he's not in survival anymore. So he needs a new strategy. He doesn't need a survival strategy. He's already survived. That problem is solved. What he needs is a thrival strategy. Yeah. He needs a strategy for thriving. He's already survived. But what he said to me I thought was really interesting. He said, I can sort of see that person. It's like they're over there. And I just have to catch up with them. And I said, no. The person is already here. You just have to get out of your own way. That's identity. You're already a capable coach, I believe. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but do you have clients? Do they give you good feedback? Do they renew?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, then you're a good coach. The only way to know whether or not you're a good coach is somebody pays you and they renew. If they pay you and they cancel, that's not enough that they paid you. If they renew, you know, because money doesn't lie. No one is going to give you money unless they've seen a return on their investment. And so if you have clients and your clients have renewed, you're a good coach. If you have clients who have renewed and you have some clients who have not renewed, then those clients were not a good fit for you. They were not your ideal client, or you didn't serve that client powerfully enough. You can always be a better coach. What can you learn about coaching from the clients who don't renew with you? But if you have clients that renew and they're paying you, then you're a good enough coach. There's nothing in the way of you creating a successful coaching practice. Your identity has to catch up with your capability. Okay? Yes?
I would just add to that or say, they don't have to all renew because many times
yes.
you put them out into the world, it's a beautiful thing, and I like to release mine out in the world. But the other thing that they do is they endlessly send referrals.
Yes, well, that's the other thing. Yeah, thank you for that. If your clients are sending you referrals, then you know you're good. And yes, to Michelle's point, everything comes to an end, My clients, the minimum engagement that I do is 3 months, and that's if someone is in transition, and they're not expected to renew. And even if they want to renew, usually I say no, because I've given them what they need for that transition. Most of my executive clients, they commit to a year, we do 3 months, they pay in advance. At the end of 3 months, they say green light, red light. Either we're going to continue or we're going to part ways. If we continue, we're going to work together for at least another 9 months. The longest client I think I've had in this way since I created Coaching from Essence was about 3.5 years. And the last year I coached him pro bono because his business was severely impacted by COVID. And then we just sort of agreed, hey, I've given you everything, So there's always a time when you part. So you're right. Clients don't renew. You agree that you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish. Sometimes clients go on hiatus. They'll quit for a while and then they come back, or they'll say, listen, I feel like I have so much to work on. Let me take a few months off, and then we'll circle back and see where I am. Okay. All right. So let me check in with you and see what this last exercise was like. By the way, when you were going through this with your partner and you were sharing your the best that you could imagine, and you were sharing your quest, and your partner was listening for this, your partner was coaching you. In other words, this is what we do as coaches. The client presents their quest, and we say, hey, is that your real dream? Not necessarily bigger, sometimes bigger, but better. Like, is that a true fit for you? Is that your real dream? Is that what you really want? Or is there somebody else in the room? Your spouse or your boss or somebody else who's sort of giving you this idea. We want to make sure that it's really their real dream. So what was this like? What was this like for you? How many of you, let me reframe it a little bit. How many of you realized when your partner sort of fed back to you or was curious about what you were presenting that you had to make some adjustments to what you were creating? Okay, good. So congratulations, you were coached. Okay. So what else? What was this like for you? Or what did you learn? Yeah, Kermit.
This happens a lot. What my partner was working on was what I was working on.
Your partner was working on something very similar to what you were working on. Great. So you found an ally. Awesome. What else? Yes, so.
The question was the hard part for me because the question felt like it had to encompass everything that I'm thinking, feeling, being, and that felt a little overwhelming. And I think I got to a question, but the question is so open-ended and wide, and maybe that's the point. And I took yours as the example. How do I be open-hearted? So the question's just kind of sitting there like, is it too nebulous? Or is it too big and too wide? Or I struggle with the need for specificity because we do need some guardrails and things. Or do I just go so big that then I feel like I've never quite answered the question?
Right. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but the short answer is you can get more specific when you think about how you're going to go on that quest. So a quest is conducting experiments, and you get specific about your experiments. The other thing is you can break it down. Like you can break it down. Like my quest of how I became, how can I be wholehearted? I started applying it to those, things that were my major chord. I thought, how can I be wholehearted in relationship? And so I made a commitment to myself when I was ready to start dating that I would show up as fully as myself as I could. And apparently myself is no. I don't. But she hasn't told the whole story yet either. So, so yes, you're right, Zovik. So I thought, how do I be wholehearted in relationship? How do I create a way of working where I can be wholehearted, where I can really show up as myself and not pretend that I'm an edutainer, which is what I did for like 30 years, delivering other people's stuff in the training room. What do I have to offer? Can I find the courage to just put myself out into the world, even if I'm rejected? Like that to me was a quest to be wholehearted in my work. So yes, you're right, Zovik. You can break it down for different domains, or you can get specific with your experiments, which I'll talk about shortly. Greg.
One thing I noticed was that the exercise was incredibly inspiring, right? It touched for me, that also necessarily means it comes with fear. Yeah. So my story about why people show up at bonsai meetings is because they're afraid to say the thing they really want for fear if you don't get it, you'll fail and it sucks. Yeah. So this experience both elicited deep inspiration and satisfaction to meet the longing, and it raised some fears. And it's like, oh wow, shit, what if I can't, or what if I don't get it, or what if it's not possible? So I was observing that dichotomy or that pairing.
Thank you for that. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Thanks for that. So Greg's comment was that the more inspired you are, the more fear that comes up. And I'm going to talk about that shortly. Yes, Ernest.
So with Daisy's help, I was able to reconnect with something that I originally started exploring years and years ago after my mom passed away, around the idea of meaningful work. And so there was a question and these ideas that I was noodling around that after through conversation with Daisy, I reconnected back to that period of time. And that gave rise to a question that is more congruent, and it is not something that I would have thought about without Daisy's help.
Great. So what Ernest said is Daisy helped him to reconnect with something that he knew a long time ago, and that helped him to change his question. So you got something you didn't know you needed.
And found out something that I didn't.
And learned something you didn't know you knew. That's a good coaching conversation, I think. Okay. I'm sorry, Daisy, I didn't hear you.
A ditto in that Ernest did the same for me.
Okay.
So
Ernest did the same for Daisy. Great, thank you so much. Cookie.
So Allison really was helped me clarify my question, but there was also, it was sort of like a sounding board.
Yeah.
It was bouncing back. So I cleared up several issues and brought a couple of new ones in.
Good. Good. So Cookie said that Allison was a sounding board for her and helped her to clarify. That's great. Thank you.
So when I first started, I didn't know how to dream. And I don't know if you remember one of the coaching sessions, like I am half-assed everywhere I go and I don't know what I'm doing. But today when I met Rosanna, I felt clear and confident what my be is, and it felt good, and it felt great in my body, in my heart, and it was so aligned with my essence. But the in between, I didn't know how to dream, and what I am today is becoming vulnerable.
Yes.
And admitting and being truly honest with myself was the hardest part. That was the hardest part of the journey.
Yes.
And thank you.
So Isabella is just saying that, you know, dreaming and becoming clear in the way that she is now is all about becoming vulnerable. And yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Okay, Burju and then Daniel, and then we're going to move on.
Okay, well, I just had a question about this dreaming big, the being mind thing.
Yeah.
I sometimes find it hard for me to dream big. I'm wondering, have you worked with like female executives who would have more issues about dreaming big? Like, is there a gender component to this, the bonsai effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a tendency for women. So her question is there a difference between men and women in how they dream? And yes, my observation is that women make themselves smaller, and men are often inflated, and neither one is helpful. So men sometimes come to me and they say, you know, they want to win a Nobel Prize. No, I had a client who said that. I said, why do you want to win a Nobel Prize? I mean, that was so obviously the solution to a problem that no longer exists. He wanted the affirmation. What do you want to win a Nobel Prize in? I don't even remember what it was. But focus on that, fine. Focus on creating that kind of impact, if that's a true expression of your essence. But so men tend to be a little bit inflated. But, that's a generalization. But it isn't always true. It's also very individual. Yes, there are differences coaching women and coaching men. There are several people here who focus on coaching men. I know that there are some people here who focus on coaching women, and yes, the challenges are, Zovig, the challenges are different for many people, and they're also the same for many people. It may show up a little bit differently, but for everybody, it's the love threshold, which we're going to talk about a lot tonight. Daniel, and then we do need to move on. So
one thing just to get in on that, you told us before that it's not about the dream, it's about the dreaming results. Exactly. And the other thing in the check-in session, what I realized is that understanding that not A is, you were saying like B can sometimes be in a response to A. Yeah. Right. But realizing I don't want A anymore. Right. You know, like I created my A right now is the B of
That's
B.
right.
I'm grateful for it. Yeah. And my B right now is not my A.
Is not what you wanted. Yeah. No, oh, your B. Yeah. Not what you have. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So Daniel said the first thing he said was, what I say is that it isn't the dream that's important, it's the dreaming. Most people don't have permission to dream. So whatever their dream is, first of all, the dream is going to change. That's why I wasn't afraid to have you do this exercise again for those of you that have done it before, because it should be different by now. You're not the same person you were a year ago or however long it's been since you started working with me. It should become clearer, it should evolve a little bit, or and so it's not about the dream. The dream will change. But it's about the dreaming. It's the permission to dream about something else that might be possible for you. And it's also not being dissatisfied with where you are. Like, I love my life just the way it is. I could stay at A and I could be happy. But I don't want to stay at A because there's still things that I want to create and do and experience and love and so it's not, we're not dreaming because there's always something wrong with where we are. We're dreaming because we want to live adventurously. Okay? All right. We need to move on because I want to cover a few more things, and then we're going to break for lunch at 12:30. But Greg brought up an important point, which is that it can be challenging. You can get inspired by your B, and if it's a true B, especially, like if you go through this and it's true and authentic and congruent, and it can be very inspiring. So why is it so difficult? Let me ask you a question, and all of you know the answer. I think most of you, maybe one or two of you don't know the answer to this question, but it's a riddle. It's a Zen koan, okay? And here's the riddle. It's a little bit of a gruesome image, but bear with me. You take a baby goose and you put it in a glass bottle and you pull the neck through so that you can feed the goose, and you feed the goose until it's too big for the bottle. So here's the riddle. How do you get the goose out of the bottle? And there's two rules. First rule is you can't kill the goose, and the second rule is you can't break the bottle. How do you get the goose out of the bottle? You know the answer. Okay. So what most people say, and I ask this of audiences that haven't heard this before, the first one is you put the goose on a diet. No, because the goose is too big. The bones are too big. It won't come out. Can we melt the bottle? No, you'll cook the goose. Okay, and then I say, look, I give you a hint, you're the goose. Then you're not going to starve yourself, and you're not going to cook yourself. You're going to break the fucking bottle. Who said you had to follow the rules? So the point is, we all have rules. The rules tell us what fits for us and what doesn't, what belongs with us and what doesn't, what's possible. The rules tell us how we're supposed to be, and we all live inside a bottle. As far as I can tell, as long as you're alive, you live in a bottle. Maybe enlightenment is no bottle, but I'm not enlightened. As far as I can tell, if you're alive, you're in a bottle, but we can get a bigger bottle. The way I think of coaching is about tapping on other people's bottles and helping them break their bottle from the inside. I'm not a believer in breaking anybody else's bottle. To me, that's abuse. You'll see it in cults. Coaching from Essence is not a cult. I don't believe in breaking anybody else's bottle, but we tap, 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 and we help them to break their own bottle. Yeah, Jeremiah.
Can you succinctly, what is breaking someone's bottle from the outside?
What does breaking someone's bottle from the outside look like? Who here have I worked with and I tapped on your bottle and you broke it from the inside? Vanessa. What was that? Can you answer?
On the outside.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm sorry. I misheard. So his question is, what does it look like if you're breaking someone's bottle from the outside? Okay. Breaking someone's bottle from the outside is to my mind, it's abuse. It's provoking someone so harshly that you take away their safety. I always think about the client's safety. I'm going to talk more about provocation tomorrow, because we absolutely need to challenge our clients. Otherwise, they're going to stay in their comfort zone. Challenging a client is part of good coaching, but it's not for us to make the client unsafe. The client should always feel safe. They believe what they believe until they don't believe it. I'm not going to make a client wrong or stupid or attack them personally or anything like that to create a trauma that will disrupt their current identity and replace it with another identity. That, to me, is breaking someone's bottle from the outside. Is that?
Do you see this in large group awareness training? Is that what you're thinking?
I see it in cults. Okay? There are some fascinating documentaries that I can't remember the names of right now, but that's the kind of behavior I'm talking about. Okay? Yes, Vanessa.
The way I've been thinking of it is the line between an appropriate provocation and gaslighting.
Okay, say more about that. Vanessa said it's the difference between appropriate provocation and gaslighting. What do you, just so everyone understands, what do you mean by that?
Well, to me, gaslighting is diminishing their experience, diminishing their knowing, debating or arguing what they feel is true, even if it is a limiting belief, trying to convince, push them to see the way you see it as the right way. Making them feel small, wrong or bad.
So she rattled off a lot of things, but making them feel small, wrong, or bad is a pretty good summary. If you can kind of hold this, we're going to talk more about it tomorrow with evocation and provocation. But basically, just always think about respect. I always respect the client and where they are. They decide where they are and how fast they want to go. I may get impatient and think they could go so much faster. I tap, tap, tap. What I tell clients is, look, I'm right here with you. I'm right behind you. And if you stop, I'll bump into you. That's what provocation is. I'm going to bump into them. I'm going to challenge them a little bit. But it's not for me to break their bottle. We can talk more about that tomorrow. Okay, so here's why it's so difficult after you're inspired to create B prime. The first thing is you're in a bottle. You have all your limiting beliefs, your identity, your values, your rules about life, and all the things that you decided the past meant to you, and all of those things create your blind spots and limits for you. And that's a big part of what keeps you there. It's gravity. You notice that A and B look a little bit like planets? A has a lot of gravity. It wants to pull you to keep things where you are, where things are known, where they're familiar, where they're safe. And so you have to escape the gravity of A. A has the most gravity. B has a little bit of gravity. B prime has very little gravity. So what we want to do is we want to create more gravity around B, the best thing that you can imagine, and B prime, the idea that something even more is possible for you. Okay? And I'll talk about that in a minute. But so what is gravity exactly? Gravity is thresholds. When you try to leave A and go to create your dream, there are certain things that will work against you. And they're well-intentioned. They're trying to keep you safe and comfortable. The first threshold is silliness. I call it silliness. What it really is that it's all about status seeking. In other words, it's all about looking good. So for some of you, it was an edge to do your self-portrait last night because you were afraid you wouldn't look good. You looked around the room and you saw all the ones that were really beautiful and where someone had some real artistic talent or whatever, and you thought, oh my God, I could never do that. Oh, this is not going to look good. Oh, they're going to think that question mark is an earring. You know, it's the silliness threshold. It's the fear of embarrassing yourself, of losing face, of looking bad, and that is enough to stop a lot of people from doing what they need to do to be more successful or to create what they want. These don't necessarily come in this order, but they often do. Silliness. The second threshold often is the knowledge threshold. So you think about doing something and the knowledge threshold tells you all the reasons why it won't work. In other words, you know too much. Or you don't know enough. You say, oh, I've never done that before. I don't know how to do that. You have a dream about starting a business, but you think, oh, I could never start a business. I don't know the first thing about starting a business. And so you never pursue that dream. The next threshold often is the trust threshold. It's what if I get hurt? What if I put myself out there and I get rejected? I mean, beyond the silliness, beyond embarrassing myself, what if I really get rejected and criticized, and or what if I collaborate with somebody and they deceive me or cheat me, or what if I take a risk and what if I have an inflated idea of myself and I put myself out there and I fail, imposter syndrome. So it's trust. It's having the trust. It could be having the trust that the universe will support you. When I talk about essence, abundance, service, and trust, that trust, what I mostly mean by that is trusting that if you put yourself out in the world as your best self, the world will come to meet you and support you. So trust. The next one is sanity, which is maybe what, Greg, you were talking about, the fear. You get really inspired, and then the more inspired you are, the more the fear comes up. And the fear is the fear of being overwhelmed. Like, what if I commit to creating this business, let's say, and I lose everything? What if it just all turns to shit? And there's a constellation of things that can happen on a quest, which I call fucked. Fear, uncertainty, confusion, exhaustion, and doubt. And every entrepreneur I've ever worked with has had some taste of that. But it's the fear of just really being overwhelmed and not knowing how to handle it. The last threshold and the deepest threshold, the thing that I think is at the core of everything that keeps us from living our essence, is what I call the love threshold, which is the fear that if you really knew the truth about yourself, you would discover that you are fundamentally unlovable. And worse, that everybody else knows it. Or if they don't know it, they'll find out. And we're going to spend part of the afternoon and all of the evening going deeper into the love threshold. Because if you're not creating what you really want, there's a very good chance that the love threshold is the biggest thing that's in the way and the hardest thing to see and work with. Okay? Yes?
The fear of
feels like it could feel a little like the trust threshold, fear of being rejected, which to me translates as fear of not being loved. How does the love threshold do that?
So the question is, what's the difference between the trust threshold and the love threshold? Trust threshold could be other people. It's like, what if people cheat me? Like, if I collaborate with somebody, what if they, what if the universe doesn't support me? The love threshold is deeper. It's, if I really knew the truth about myself, I've been broken all along. I've been a phony all along, and people are going to find out that I'm really a bad person. There's really something fundamentally wrong with me. That's the love threshold. It's deep. Yeah.
Just to add to that, it almost feels like the trust threshold is about finding out that other people aren't lovable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a way to put it.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it's not just other people, it's also life. Like that maybe life is not trustworthy.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, Daniel.
I had an experience with the love threshold this week, and I feel like the love threshold feels like trusting my essence.
Yes, exactly.
Right. I dropped an F-bomb in the workshop I was running, and the woman I was hosting for came up to me and she said, "Chad, the guy who helped me get this gig, she mentioned that you sometimes do this to really wake a group up." And I loved that. That was awesome. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah, great.
That's me.
That's great. So if you didn't hear Daniel just did a big presentation before he came here, and he said fuck, or fuck, or fucked, or fucking, or some version of, or maybe more. And he was really worried that, everybody was going to hate that, and somebody came up afterward and told them how much they loved that. So, yes. The real quest that I think all of us are on is from 4S, which stands for self-interest, status-seeking, scarcity, and survival, which is what I think all of us are taught will make us happy. That's what our culture believes will make us happy. The water that we all swim in is, hey, look out for yourself. Make sure that you look good. There isn't enough for everybody, so you've got to get yours. We have to compete. Competition is the way to succeed. And you've got to survive. And really what that survival means is your ego has to survive, your identity. Whatever false self you've constructed for yourself has to survive.
Status-seeking, scarcity, survival, and what?
Self-interest, status-seeking, scarcity, and survival. If you say it in that order, it just rolls off the tongue. Okay? And what we're really aiming for, I think, what worked for me, what I realized on my journey when I was really depressed and I thought, fuck, I've created the exact opposite of everything I wanted. How did I do that? And I realized it was because I'd been living all along out of self-interest, status-seeking, scarcity, and survival. What I think we really want is east. Essence, abundance, service, and trust. What I really wanted was not to be this false self anymore, but to show up fully as my best self. My natural way of being in the world that is valuable. That's essence. Abundance is, as soon as I started to really look at my life and sort of do some love threshold work and realize that I actually do have something worthwhile to offer the world, I started to feel just overflowing with it. Like I just wanted to give it away. And that's service. I didn't want to be self-interested anymore. I didn't want to be transactional anymore. I wanted to create relationships, and I wanted to serve people and help people, and I just wanted to give it all away. And trust is, there was a little period of time where I thought, shit, can I really do that? If I do that, will the world support me? Is it possible to do that, or should I just keep doing this corporate gig where I'm an edutainer delivering other people's stuff? Because that's safe and predictable. And I can make my, $100K a year. And so it was a leap of faith to say, no, I'm gonna conduct an experiment, which is what a quest is. I'm gonna conduct an experiment. I'm gonna just start showing up fully as myself in my relationships. And I'm gonna find a way to work where I can coach people and show up as myself and coach from there. And I'm gonna focus on serving people instead of just seeing what I can get out of it. And trust that if I do that, the world will support me. And that was a very successful experiment. It did. Okay? So now I want to tell you, so now you know about paths and quests. You know what a good quest looks like, what a good bee looks like. Now I want to tell you how to go on a quest. So you have your question. How do you go on a quest? The first step is you make a list of everything you really want but think is impossible. And the reason for that is you want what you want, even if it's not possible. You want what you want. I wanted Michelle. I didn't think it was possible when I was depressed and I thought, who would want me? But I still wanted it. And so I made a list of what I wanted, even though I didn't think it was possible. I wanted to coach people. I wanted to do work where I could just show up as myself and not pretend I was somebody else. I didn't know if that was possible, but I still wanted it. So I made a list of everything I wanted, whether or not I thought it was possible. That's the first step. Yes?
Is that list different that I would read and we wrote down and then talk about it?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Okay. So her question was, is that different from the B that you wrote down? I'm getting there. So first you make a list of everything you want. Then you choose something that requires a personal transformation. That's your B. So when you looked at what you wrote down, if it was something that you already know how to do, it doesn't require personal transformation, that's not a quest for B prime. So that's where you take your list, just everything you want, and then you say, all right, what would require a real personal transformation here? What would be a real journey of discovery of who I am? What would create a life I love, and what would be my best way of serving, and who would I become? You pick that, and you focus on that. And then you clarify. The purpose of trying to distill it down to a question is just to give yourself clarity. If you have too many things that you're working on, by the way, this is also very true when you're coaching executives. I remember I coached a team once, and I said, okay, so what are your objectives? They handed me this PowerPoint deck with like 10 slides of objectives. I said, this explains why nothing is happening in your company. Nobody can keep track of all this shit. You've got to identify just a few ways of knowing whether or not you're winning, and make sure that everybody in the company understands that and how they contribute to that. And I'll talk more about this tomorrow morning. But that's the reason for the question. Having the question of how do I become wholehearted just focused everything I did everywhere in my life. I just applied it to everything in my life. And then you gather your allies. I used to talk a lot about the hero's journey. I'm not going to go into that now. I know that many of you are familiar with it. But one of the reasons I stopped talking about the hero's journey, and I've kind of replaced it with A to B, is that when people hear the hero's journey, they really latch onto the hero and their journey. And to me, that's missing the entire point. What they do is they grab onto the hero and the boon. The boon is what they're going to get. You know, the gold ring or the treasure or whatever it is. And to me, that's missing the entire point of the hero's journey. The point of the hero's journey is gathering allies and service. The whole reason you can get the boon is because you've gathered allies. And the whole reason for getting the boon is so that you can do the return journey and you can give it back to the world. So why not just start there? Why not just start with the intention of going on a journey where you can serve people and make the world better? And why not just start gathering allies? So that's what I did. When I was depressed and I was sort of figuring this out and trying to think, how do I save my own life? I came up with the idea of being the host. And so I started some meetup groups because I figured if I was the host, then I would meet everybody. And I'm not that good at networking, and believe it or not, I'm actually a little bit shy. And so I would go to networking events and I would just I wasn't good at networking. But I thought if I'm the host, then everybody has to come to me, and then I meet everybody. So I started a photo walking group, because that was something that I would do for fun. And I started a group called the Compassionate Leadership Project that only met once. 13 or 14 people showed up. 2 of those people became my best friends. And they were part of these other communities that I talked about earlier and introduced me into this group of people who became my friends and support. Even though at that time I was actually suicidal. I was more depressed than I'd ever been in my life. And they were my allies. So it's important to gather allies. That's one reason when I started Coaching from Essence from the very beginning, I wanted it to be a community because I understand the importance of allies. So you gather your allies. And then you conduct experiments. A quest is all about conducting experiments. It's all about trying different things. You conduct experiments, you try different things, you go down different little paths. It doesn't take very far down a path to realize whether or not it might be productive for you. And if it's not, you try another path. You just try a lot of different things. So when I was sort of figuring all this out, I've just conducted lots of experiments. I've done Coaching from Essence in lots of different ways. I went on something like 30-some dates before I met Michelle. Those were all experiments. So you conduct experiments. The sort of coolest experiment, meaning not very intense, not very scary, is you just do some research. If you have an idea about doing something, you do some research. Maybe a little bit higher is you do an informational interview with someone, or you actually talk to somebody else, or you tell somebody else your dream. Or you conduct a personal experiment. You try something for yourself, depending on what it is. Or a higher one is you put something out there. You do something public. So before there was Coaching from Essence, I just posted on Facebook. That was an experiment. That was a pretty high heat experiment because what if people just rejected the idea? Or what if people came, worse yet, came and then rejected the idea? Yes, Tatiana.
So with the conducting experiments, I've noticed that there is often a criticism of people who start a lot of things and don't finish any of them.
Yes.
My question is, do those things look similar? Mm-hmm. Right? Or half-assing things, right? When you said that, I thought maybe you're just trying a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we, are they similar things in many cases? And if so, how do we reframe that? Because I do find that people who are trying to do new things in the world, truly new things, often are criticized for starting a lot of things and not finishing.
Yes. So the question is, you have experiments, and then you have people who try a bunch of things and never finish anything. Okay? And are they the same thing? They're not the same thing, and I'll tell you the difference shortly. Okay? But if I don't, bring it up again. Okay? So you conduct experiments, And then you optimize for serendipity, okay? I'm going to talk about serendipity more tomorrow. But optimizing for serendipity is you let the universe support you. You put yourself out there and you create so many ways for good things to happen to you that they do. If you sit home alone in your room, it's hard for good things to come and find you. You have to put yourself out there and make yourself discoverable so that good things can find you. If you want to find a beloved, you have to go on dates so that the person can find you. Michelle was looking for me. If I hadn't been on Meet Mindful, she might never have, well, that's another story. But anyway, because she would have found me, because someone would have introduced us if I hadn't said no. But you have to put yourself out into the world so that good things can find you, okay? You have to face your demons. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. That's what I call the dark ally. You have to face the fact that you might have a lesson instead of B prime. You might have to face the fact that you have certain constraints in your life. You might have to face the fact that you have a call you can't refuse, like cancer. Something happens over which you have no control, and then what are you going to do about it? And finally, you have to choose and decide. And this is the answer to your question, Tatiana. Doing a lot of things and never finishing anything is being stuck making choices. So here's the difference between a decision and a choice. To choose something means literally to taste or to test. So if you conduct an experiment, you make a choice, I'm going to try something, I'm just going to taste it. I'm going to test it. I'm going to see whether or not I like it. If you only did that, it doesn't even matter what other people say about it. It's the fact that it's like digging a lot of shallow holes. If you only do that, you'll never hit oil or find gold or whatever the analogy is, right? Like you can't just keep trying lots of things and not giving things a chance to work. Zovig is a perfect example of that. Do you mind if I... Would you just tell quickly the story about your workshop? Yeah.
So I wanted to have a group coaching program, and I started last summer, and I created a program, and I launched it, and I promoted the hell out of it, and nobody signed up. And then I'm like, all right, so I tweaked it, and I changed all the stuff about it, and I promoted it again in the fall, and nobody signed up. And then I tried it a third time at the beginning of the year, and I changed the name, and changed the whole thing, and I promoted the hell out of it, and nobody signed up. And then in March or April, I thought, I really want to do this. Like, this is still exciting for me. So I came up with another name for it. I tweaked the content a bit, and then I just started talking about it in a way that felt very essence-like. I think that was the shift, the way I was promoting it. And then I got 5 people to sign up. So I did my first cohort in July and in early August, and I'm like, well, shit, I'm going to do it again. So I'm doing another one that starts October 3rd, and I have 2 people signed up. And I have a call with somebody on Monday or Tuesday from grade school who saw my LinkedIn post about it and was like, this is interesting. I mean, we're talking 30-some years ago, and we're talking about her signing up. So I will at least have 3.
So if you didn't hear Zovig, how many attempts did you?
It was on my 4th try.
On her 4th try, she got people to sign up for her workshop. And she kept changing it every time and making it more congruent with her essence. And then serendipitously, she now has someone she knows from 30 years ago is probably going to take it. Yes?
One of the ways I look at it is experiments are something you learn from. Right? So every time you try this, you learn something, you move forward. You try this, you learn something, you move forward. You keep tweaking things, you move forward. I think the difference is people are simply trying lots of things all the time, experimenting. I think I'll do this for a living. Maybe no, I'll do that. They're not learning and moving, right?
Okay, but so I think the story of success looking backwards
Yes.
is easy.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of it, when you're on your 4th try, or when you're on your 3rd career, right, and you change a couple of times, you might think that you're learning from it, but the feedback you're getting is, why don't you ever finish, like, the thing, why don't you just go and try, the same thing again and again and again, right? And so I think, like, looking backwards on success, about what that path was like, when you're in it, it feels different, right?
Yes. Yes. So just one second. And we do need to wrap up because I don't want us to miss lunch. But yes, it's very easy to look backward and know that it turned out okay. It's different if you're in the middle of trying a bunch of different things and people are saying you're not serious, you're a quitter or whatever, you're not finishing things. First of all, I don't care what other people think. That's status seeking, okay? You have to be willing to let that go. Other people are not going to understand when you're going on a quest. You may lose some friends who don't want you to change. So it's not that I don't care what other people think. I do, and I listen to it, and I try it on, and I say, does that fit? Am I really a quitter? Am I not finishing things? Am I really all of that? But if I'm not, then thank you for that. I'm going to keep going on a quest. So this is the other part of it. To choose means to taste or test. Decide means to cut away. It's like incision. An incision means to cut in. A decision means to cut away. So the more you do experiments, the more you know clearly what you're saying no to. And one of the tools that I use with people when I'm coaching them on a quest is what I call is not, is it, or yes, no, maybe. In other words, you're conducting all these experiments and you're learning from each of these experiments. And an experiment might tell you, oh, yes, this is what I want. I want to create more of this. This is not what I want. I tried that. It didn't work. It didn't fit. I didn't like it. I'm taking that off the table. I'm deciding. I'm cutting it away. And this is maybe, or is it? I need to conduct more experiments here. It might be. I'm curious about this. And the more experiments you conduct, the more you can put things in the it's not, the no column, what you're saying no to. And the clearer you get about what it is. And then you conduct experiments that then help you to create more form. And then other people look at you and they say, shit, how did you do that? Okay? Vanessa, you had a question, and then we're going to go to lunch.
Comment. So what I heard in Zoe's story and kind of what you're asking about is also the triple loop learning.
Yes.
It's like, well, let me do it a different way. Well, let me think about a different name. We think about a different price point, and then you decided, I'm going to be more Zoe about this.
Yes.
And I think
Exactly.
that's where it shifts
The
from
more-
tasting to
Yes.
deciding to come from essence to be. Whereas we can do many different careers and think about many different careers, but once we like decide to be ourselves in how
Yes.
we do and how we think, it might not even look totally revolutionary. It's just a little
Sure.
bit different.
Yeah.
The more Zovig is Zovig, the more successful she will be. And by successful, I don't just mean in superficial terms, money and whatever. I mean, the more successful, the happier, the more fulfilling, the more meaningful her work, the more she'll be serving, and more alive, and everything else. Because Zovig is fucking Zovig. She's been lighting fires since 1978. Okay? Okay. Thank you. Let's go to lunch. And when we come back, Michelle is going to do some work with you around around love, and we're going to work on the love threshold and essence, and so much fun.